capture those sounds second, as opposed to a lot of other amazing engineers and producers that look at things very much more from the perspective of like, how is this all going to sound like on a sonic level, which is important also. It's just, I think that there's like the language of music, being able to communicate with musicians and a singer as well, and be able to, to say, hey, for this note, can you actually pop into your mix voice so you're not pushing so hard? And then we can double that and it's going to sound bigger, but it's not going to sound as strainy. And then let me sing you the harmony part because I worked it out. And like, I think those sorts of elements of being able to incorporate like musicianship into production is a big part of what I feel like I bring to this.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's awesome. I feel like there's like a continuum of like kinds of producers where there's like producers that are musicians that happen to be producers. And then there's like total engineers that happen to produce,
right?
But they're really like focused on. And then there's there's a whole area in between.
Yeah, the overlap.
The overlap. I feel like we both kind of fall somewhere in the in between area.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, I still practice on a bunch of different instruments. I still keep up trying to. I mean, guitar is my main, but I have a piano at home, and I still try and practice that. And I'm always working on the vocal thing and coming up with the coolest harmonies that I can, and playing bass. Whenever I hear a bass line that I love, I run home and try and learn it. I just think it's important to like keep the musicianship side up, as well as it is whenever there's like a new plugin that someone turns me on to. I'm like, okay, cool. If I'm actually going to go and like rent it or buy it or do the trial or whatever, like I want to learn it enough to be able to figure out if it's going to serve anything for me, just so that I'm not like one of those guys that has like, I have everything and I can't really use any of it, because it can get overwhelming, especially on the engineering side with how many plugins and cool pieces of gear there always are,
Yeah, totally. I love that. I feel like I should probably demo plugins a bit more before I buy them. I have a couple regrets.
Yeah, of course.
But usually the regret is like you just forget about it because you already have like a workflow, and then you forget about the new plugins that you bought because you already are using the same plugins for your mixing because you just know it works.
Yeah, sometimes I'll try and force myself to like use something, and then if it just isn't working out, then I'm like, all right, I'll just go back to the thing that I know is going to get me there. But especially when it's like cool sound effect sort of things, or if you're trying to go, like on one of the songs that I think I had put on the playlist that I sent you, there was like some drum loop sort of element, and like the things that I put on that were not what I usually would have. They were like new plugins I was messing with, and just like forcing myself to arrive where I know it's supposed to sound, sometimes that helps.
Yeah, no, I think it's fun. Like people don't, I think it's like hip to be cheap about plugins and say it's just about what's in your ear and like getting that, which is true. And I overall buy that approach. But there's something inspiring about playing with something new. The same way like playing your instrument inspires you to come up with a part for the song. It could be the impetus of everything, and a plugin or a new instrument. Any of these things can really just kind of inspire you to kind of do something new. And sometimes spending money on gear does help.
Absolutely.
Even though maybe it shouldn't be the go-to move, but
every once in a while, though, it shakes things up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So speaking about your approach to working and, talking about plugins or whatever, let's check out the Sauce segment.
Cool, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. You sent me a song called War Profiteer by Joker's Hand. So let's have a listen for about 90 seconds and we'll talk a little bit about what went into it. Sound cool?
Sounds good.
Hey, for the goodie and the commas, what's a little pain if you're living like a baller? Hey, level cities like a bomber, making bank, keep my women hotter than a sauna. Call it selling my soul, getting money, yeah, the less that you know. With the flick of a pen, make a nation fall, I don't care what or when. That 7 Nation Army bought all of this, not sorry. More die, the more she want me. Don't care unless she naughty. Hey, for the goodie and the commas, what's a little pain if you're living like a baller? Hey, level cities like a bomber, making bank, keep my women hotter than a sauna. Hey, to the fella getting shot up, making all the noise doesn't lead to any drama. Hey, with the money I'm set, hoping that the people never give it a rest. Hey, like Cruella de Vil, get that money, she don't care what I kill. Hey, thinks I'm holding it down, calling all her friends when she slips out of town. Want foreign cars, I pain.
Yeah, Steve, sounds great.
Thanks, man.
It's almost like a pop punk band and Sublime had a baby or something.
You nailed it. That's exactly what we were going for.
All right. I guess my discography in my brain worked there. So
Yeah. I mean, the funniest thing about that song, usually when I play it for people, and that song actually spent a while on the radio and out here, is
That's
that
sick.
they're not a reggae band. Like, they're as far from it as really as it gets, which is sort of what I loved about this song, is that it's, you know, the lyrical content when I first heard the demo, which was just him singing and playing an acoustic guitar, is like very much about profiting off of other people's suffering, which makes a lot of sense with where things have been the last couple of years in this country, you know? And
Sure.
I just thought it was so clever because it's like really a dark topic, but, and I know there's a name for it and I always forget when there's something that's like lyrically dark matched with something that feels like really uplifting and happy. And it's that like sort of weird mixture.
Probably a German word, right? It's like one of those.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So, and I thought that it would be cool to honor that. And part of it was like, it already sort of felt like he had the, you know, the sort of the reggae skank thing going on. But I was like, man, it'd be really cool to play into that. And like, even at the end of the song where there's like that la 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 line that comes in, just like little things like that make it almost feel like childlike and happy, even though it's super dark. So that's sort of what I was chasing on this one.
yeah, it's really cool. And I like. There's also those like little cool candies, like the money clinking on the left ear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's some. So that was like the final thing we did was like search for things or create like elements, like little ear candy, sort of sampled-ish sounding things that whatever was going on with the lyric sort of underline it and put it in bold so that it made people like really. It's like sort of a hack of how you can make a listener like be like, oh, that's cool, even just subconsciously, because it's like it's like putting an exclamation part after a sentence, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were a lot of cool like little things that happened on this one. It was so much fun putting the song together.
Sure. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the first step, you know, was I had the demo, and so I had some of this. I'm sort of imagining what happened because I can't totally remember everything, but just from working with those guys, Joker's Hand, a lot, I'm imagining that I had a pretty good demo that was recorded in Logic by Kevin, the singer, of him just playing and singing, and I asked for separate stems of those, put them into a Pro Tools session. I probably moved things around a little bit, and I think we worked on the arrangement of this one, he and I, a little bit, making sure that it was how we wanted it, extending the ending, just like little things like that. And then from there, I had a couple of, you know, his bandmates came in, drummer and bass player, who are both great players. And I had sort of an idea for the chorus from the beginning of production of having sort of like a programmed bass part doing this like wobble in the chorus that sort of gives you like a bum 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 bum, kind of like just gives this pulse. So what I wanted him to play would be not that, but something that would actually be just like a really catchy ear candy hook, you know, that would just make the whole thing move. And the person who played it is Matthew Dennis, and he's such a good bass player. And what I love about his playing is that he always comes up with these things that are so singable. Like you walk away almost singing the bass line, you know, oftentimes.
Yeah.
And the way that I sort of, because I loved what he played in the verses in particular, the way that I really highlighted what he did was after he was done recording it, I recorded myself playing on a Moog synth the exact same line and then blended the two. So you get a lot of that like really subby programmed bass.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a cool and interesting bass tone. You know what I mean? Like not typical, you know?
Right. Exactly. And then I even had like guitar, I think it was in the chorus, following like this underlying guitar line, because you have the obvious guitars that are just playing the changes. And then there's like one guitar part that's following pieces of the bass line that's just going like gung, 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 do-do-dum, and just like picking up pieces of the bass and then compress that really heavy, high pass it so you're not getting any bass information and tuck it with like, you know, and it just sounds cool. It just makes the bass sound even thicker, like it's working in multiple octaves, you know?
That's so cool. And also like when you're doing like a ska kind of beat, you know, the bass has so much room, right? Because it's playing when the kick isn't playing.
Exactly.
So it has all the space to kind of just breathe and be melodic, and you know, like the Paul McCartney thing, or the even though obviously Paul McCartney's not a reggae player, but whatever. Yeah,
no,
like
totally,
it has that room to do the melodicism, you know.
Yeah, and the drums were quite simple, played all the way through. I wanted to keep it that way so that it felt like a drum loop, because then like in sections, and I can't remember quite where, but I know at least the first verse, I did sort of what we were talking about a minute ago, where I was using plugins that I might not have used before. But I had him play really tight all the way through the song, comped that, which didn't take very much time because he's a great drummer. And then for the first verse, I put Saturn, which is by Fab Filter, and Decapitator by Sound Toys, and basically just created like a loop that sounds like it was like a drum machine kind of a thing that's going on underneath. And then I had a percussionist come and play over that. So there's like, maracas and a gyro and like all these like instruments that vibra slap and spots. And it's like meant to sound sort of silly and uplifting and so cheery the whole way through, so that there leaves like on the philosophical, like where I was going with this song level, like it leaves all of the room for the darkness of what he's actually saying, because all of these other elements are just like carefree and the guitar parts sound happy, they're uplifting. And then you have this lyric that's like very doom and gloom.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to re-listen and listen out for the lyrics a bit more. I feel like I often miss lyrics because I'm mostly getting a vibe, and obviously I'm listening to the vocalist. But like, I think lyrics are like, it takes me like 3 listens to realize what the lyrics are.
And we knew that too working on it. That was part of the challenge, and also why I wanted to add samples was to make sure people actually listened, because it's really easy to just be like, oh, this is a feel good song, until you hear what he's saying with. Just like Cruella de Vil, get all that money, don't care who I kill, or whatever that line is. It's just like, ooh, that's a good one,
It's dark, yeah.
Yeah, so.
That's super dark. Wow, well, amazing. Well, it sounds great. And I guess my last question in terms of like tonality would be like the drums. Was it just the Saturn and the Fab Filter, the Saturn and Decapitator? Like the snare drum really popped.
Yeah, so that sound is just on the loop part of the song in the beginning. And then when the kit actually comes in full, I'm pretty sure I still keep that loop going underneath. But it's just the sound of, it's how I had the drums sort of working that day. I can't remember what snare he was using. It might have been, I don't remember.
Like a piccolo or something.
Yeah, it was something that was tuned pretty high. And then just how I usually sort of capture the drums and, with just the sort of the usual nerdy parallel compression stuff. And there was really nothing too fancy about any of that.
Nice. Do you remember what bass the bass player was using?
Gosh.
Just because I'm a bass player, so I'm always
I wish
interested.
that I could. He is again one of those guys that will show up with like 3 or 4 basses, and the funniest thing, and I can't remember if it was on this one or not, is that all of it. I mean, he has like everything that you could want, like every different sounding, but an amazing old P bass, and then some like new custom bass by Dingwall, and like all these different like things that he can do. But I feel like for these sessions, he brought in some like $300 Gretsch that like just sounded phenomenal, like crazy good. And we were joking the whole time that he spent like $20,000 or $30,000 in his life buying basses so that he could bring in like the cheapest one to a session, and it just sounded like the right one. I think that might have been what he used on that.
Sometimes that's all you need. I'm pretty much exclusively playing this like Epiphone viola bass these days.
Nice, man.
It's just the sound I've always wanted. I didn't know it. And it's like $400.
So cool.
Put some flat ones on it.
I was going to
like
ask.
the tone.
Yeah, so you have flats on there. That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just the sound I've always wanted, and I didn't know. I was like, okay, I went for Music Man. I got to the P bass, and the P bass was close. And then I played this. I was like, oh, this is it.
Yeah, man. Are you usually
$400?
That's so cool. And do you usually cut that like just through DI, or do you do like DI and an amp?
Yeah, I do DI. I often use like the Plug-in Alliance SVT. Okay. It's so good for that kind of a sound.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I go DI. I'm pretty basic.
That's cool.
In that sense. Yeah. Anyways, but enough about my bass playing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about energy. I know you talked about doing like 10-hour days, 7 days a week. That's not something I could do right at this point in my life. So how do you keep your creative energies going? Just energy in general. Do you have any routines? Anything you do specifically that kind of gives you the energy to not only live your life and do your work, but also feel creatively energetic?
Yeah, and I really have been trying to take Sundays off. And I go through periods where I get successful with that. And man, I just have the personality where I can't really sit still, and I always feel like I should be working on something, and not because I have to, but because I enjoy it. Like I love pushing things forward and being excited, and like my community of musicians and everyone that I text and talk with, like I love it so much that it's hard for me to disconnect to the point where it can be problematic. Entering workaholic zone, So I've been